Now, for majority of Season 2, one of Rudeus' missions was to discover a cure for his erectile dysfunction, and in episode 10 of the anime, we finally learn about the cure that Hitogami said he'll find at the Renoa University of Magic. Of course, this episode not only revealed the cure to his condition, but we also get to see some of his daily routines at the school, and Sylphie's growing distress about revealing her identity to Rudeus. However, there were still some interesting facts and storylines from the light novel that are left out in the episode, so in this video, I wanted to take a look at some of the removed content and the differences between the two. Also, if you haven't watched the episode yet, here's a spoiler warning just in case, and if you enjoy this type of content, feel free to let me know in the comments down below and don't forget to leave a like as well.
どこに勇気を落としてしまったんだろう。誰か僕の勇気を返してほしい。
To start, Season 2, Episode 10 or the 34th episode in the entire series is titled Your Feelings. It mainly covers chapters 7 and 8 of the light novel, although some minor sections from chapters 5 and 6 were adapted into this particular episode as well. Additionally, the opening sequence of the episode where Sylphie is worrying about losing Rudeus to Nanahoshi and being jealous of her was actually taken from both the side story chapters of Sylphie. However, a minor portion from the chapters was removed, and it mainly explained that even though Princess Ariel did allow Sylphie to freely chase after Rudeus at her own pace, but if there was no longer any chance at all, the princess wanted her to stop interacting and cut all ties with him. This actually provides so much context regarding why Sylphie was getting more anxious about Rudeus in the anime because she obviously doesn't want to be separated from him, but her own insecurity was holding her back from telling him the truth. That said, we learned that it has been a year since Rudeus started his education at the Renoa Magic University, and just like the light novel, the following scenes in the episode mostly depicts his daily routine at the school, but there were some minor changes to those events. The beginning scene where Bodyguardy was watching him train was actually greatly shortened, and some parts of the conversation from the light novel were removed as well, like Bodyguardy explaining the concept of Battle Aura to Rudeus and telling him more about the demon god Laplace. Basically, Battle Aura is simply a field of mana that covers the user's body, which will greatly improve their physical capabilities to unnatural extremes. However, when Rudeus tried to generate a Battle Aura even with the guidance of Bodyguardy, he failed despite possessing a massive supply of mana. Apparently, there were cases where people had spent a lot of time training their body, but no matter how hard they tried, they just couldn't generate a Battle Aura, and Rudeus was unfortunately one of the unlucky few. And because Bodyguardy always liked to compare Rudeus to Laplace, he goes on to mention that the demon god was also someone that could not use any Battle Aura. So when Rudeus asks if he could learn to fight like Laplace, Bodyguardy advises against it because humans were too fragile, and apparently if he uses mana like Laplace, he would literally implode. Also, Bodyguardy told Rudeus that he had fought Laplace in the past and he was almost killed by the demon god. I personally enjoyed this conversation in the light novel more because it contextualizes how strong Rudeus actually is, and it also provides some minor backstory details about Laplace. Regardless, the following sequence in this episode where Rudeus realizes that he has become more feared by the students after he defeated Bodyguardy was taken from the beginning of chapter 5, which I thought would have been shown in episode 9. But having said that, there were still some major changes to this particular scene. For example, in the anime, when Rudeus tried to greet Goliath, she simply walked away and he was later greeted by Linnea and Persena. However, in the light novel, his meeting with Goliath was more intense. He actually only wanted to apologize to her, but she misunderstood him, and that only made the situation much worse. The situation was only diffused thanks to Linnea and Persena, who also thought that Rudeus was bullying her. Luckily, Rudeus later explained to Linnea and Persena about what happened, and it was funny how they were briefly disgusted that he turned out to be the infamous panty thief at the school, although he quickly corrected them. Aside from this, their conversation about Rudeus needing more confidence was slightly altered from the light novel as well. They basically wanted Rudeus to overthrow Princess Ariel's position at the school so that he can collect the panties of all the female students, which was actually a consistent gag in the light novel, but because he was fundamentally trying to avoid all conflict and he did not want to cause any issues for Fitz, he promptly rejected their proposal. Although he did briefly entertain the idea of using his newfound fame to scare the other students, but remembering that the bullies from his previous life might have started out with this exact type of thinking, the realization caused Rudeus to quickly bury the idea. This entire sequence was definitely more interesting in the light novel, but since it doesn't have much significance in the overall narrative, I can understand why the anime decided to simplify it. In any case, when Rudeus was taking a class on detoxification magic, the anime did not provide any explanation on the subject, unlike the light novel, which goes into much more detail. To simplify this part, beginner level detoxification simply allows the user to cure very common ailments and basic poisons, But when it comes to more uncommon illnesses or poisons, they require the use of intermediate level spells, and the incantations were longer as well, although modern incantations have become much shorter and refined. For advanced level spells, it was more complex and the incantations are again longer, but moving up to the saint level, it's less about memorizing incantations and more about the amount of mana required to cast a single spell greatly increasing. Then at the king level, the incantations are crazy long, sometimes requiring the user to recite the contents of an entire book just to cast a single spell. It's also harder to learn because they are often researched or created by a nation and are normally guarded as state secrets. The highest level is the divine tier, and apparently there was only a single known spell in the world. This spell is used to cure petrification syndrome and is a closely kept secret by the Great Cathedral of Milicion. So having explained that, some of Rudeus' other daily routines from the light novel were not included in the episode as well, like him attending a class on advanced healing, and apparently Persona attended this class too, but because she was alone, he often partners with her on practical assignments. We also learned that Rudeus was helping to tutor Linnea on her elemental magic because she was struggling to understand the concepts behind it. On the topic of elemental magic, it seems that Rudeus was able to learn his first ever saint level earth magic spell called Sandstorm, which does exactly as the name implies. Surprisingly, even though Rudeus' attacks were all at the king level, he doesn't actually know any saint level spells. Now, continuing on, when he was having lunch with Zenoba and Julie, the following sequence in the episode was quite similar to the light novel, although it wasn't explicitly stated in the episode why Rudeus was having lunch inside the dining hall and that Julie can't eat on the third floor. Essentially, Rudeus and Zenoba often had their lunch outside, but because the recent weather was getting colder, he was constantly creating earth shelters outside. However, he was eventually scolded by the vice principal for building things on campus and was advised to use the school existing facilities instead. That's why they started to use the dining hall. As for why Julie could not eat on the third floor, the school apparently had an informal rule that slaves were not allowed to use the chairs on that particular floor, and even though Zenoba never treated her like one, it was easier for them to just eat on the ground floor. Afterwards, Rudeus would be helping Nanahoshi with her experiments, and the episode actually included a small exposition taken from chapter 6 of the light novel about magic circles, like how many had been lost to time and that Nanahoshi had to analyze the patterns of known magic circles to formulate her own new patterns, which wasn't mentioned in the previous episode 9. Now, their following interaction went pretty much the same, although the episode did omit the part where Rudeus was internally commenting about Nanahoshi being a professional shut-in like him. Also, the light novel goes into more detail about the book that Nanahoshi gave Rudeus. It was called Six Summoning, and it tells the story of a witch named Six who had summoned a creature that was more powerful than her, so it promptly killed and ate her. After reading the book, Rudeus states that this was more like a fairy tale rather than research material, but he did learn something like never summon anything beyond his ability to control. That's why I can understand why they decided to remove this, since it was just some minor exposition. That said, the part where Fitz had joined Rudeus to help with Nanahoshi's experiments, along with her and Rudeus walking back together after helping Nanahoshi, were not shown in the episode. They definitely should have kept this in the episode because it provides some context regarding her mana capacity when she was helping Nanahoshi, and there's a brief interaction when they were walking back where Fitz was emulating Linnea, and it was honestly pretty funny to see Rudeus questioning his sexuality. Speaking of Fitz, when Rudeus was giving Julie her daily lessons on figure making, he briefly mentions that he was making a figure on Fitz in the light novel, and although we do see the figure in the anime, it wasn't explicitly stated to be her. He also added that he was having a hard time creating the details for the figure because he couldn't visualize the body proportions of Fitz. And hearing this, Zenoba offered to help Rudeus rip off her clothes, which is honestly on brand for his character to say something so outrageous, and obviously Rudeus rejected his offer. Anyways, we now move on to the events in chapter 8 that were covered in this episode. So Rudeus will receive a letter from Sodat about meeting up in town, and compared to the anime, the light novel actually gives some additional details on why he was visiting the city. Apparently, Sodat's party was officially summoned by the clan Thunderbolt to visit the city in order to fight the Demon King Badigadi. However, the request was cancelled, so they ended up staying around town for a few days to have their yearly clan meeting. During the reunion, Alina, Lisa and Cliff had joined Rudeus, and there were mainly 3 minor changes to the overall scene. The first was Rudeus and Cliff's discussion about curses. The location and timeline that this happened was completely different. In the anime version, it takes place earlier in the episode when they were taking the detoxification class, whereas in the light novel, it takes place during the reunion and the contents of that discussion were the same. The second was their discussion about cursed and blessed children, which was taken out from the episode. Both were in essence the same. They are beings born with something strange about their mana that gives them odd powers, and the only difference is whether the effect happens to be positive or negative. This conversation in the light novel was a bit awkward for them, so I understand why it was removed. For the third change, it was Cliff's reaction to Soda's comments about Elena Lizzie being a slut. In the anime, he just sits there quietly, while in the light novel, he was furious and he almost fought with Soda, but Elena Lizzie manages to calm him down. For this, I prefer the light novel version because it makes more sense, and of course, it aligns with Cliff's personality and character as well, given how much he genuinely loves Elena Lizzie. Nevertheless, Rudeus' reunion with Soda ended, and after saying their goodbyes, Rudeus returns to the school. The subsequent events that happened at the school was nearly the same as the light novel, with some minor details being altered in the episode. Like when Rudeus realizes that he has fallen for Fitz, he outright stated that he was prepared to come to terms that he was either gay or bisexual, although he was still hoping that Fitz was a girl, so he decides to investigate about her. He would start with the school faculty, and prior to his meeting with the vice principal like we see in the episode, Rudeus had actually met with the advisor of Fitz beforehand in the light novel. On a side note, it seems that not only the students were afraid of Rudeus but some of the faculty as well. So he tried using this to threaten the advisor, but when it failed, only then he meets with the vice principal, although he still couldn't get any concrete answers about the gender of Fitz. This definitely should have been kept in the episode because it really helps to convey how desperate and determined Rudeus was to find out about her gender, which would have been quite hilarious. With that, we move on to the library, and the episode actually did a fantastic job at depicting the emotions in the scene that followed. And honestly, the reveal that Fitz is a girl had just the right amount of intensity, awkwardness, and comedy that made the anime version slightly better than the light novel, despite some minor changes to the dialogue. Also, I'm quite impressed that they were able to somehow take such a slow-paced episode and Rudeus finally discovering the cure to his ED not feel dumb or silly and actually make it quite interesting. And even if the cure was temporary, I definitely can't wait for the eventual confession that will happen in the upcoming episodes. Something is rising and it's definitely not the shield hero.
違う僕は男の子だよ
ヒッツ先輩は女だった。
But yeah, that's all the differences I can find between episode 10 of the anime and the light novel. Hopefully I managed to cover everything. Overall, I really enjoyed the episode, even though I did wish they kept some elements of the light novel in, like Rudeus spending time with Linnea and Prasanna, or Fitz helping Nanahoshi with her experiments. Also, the Fitz review was definitely my favorite part about the episode, but what's your favorite part and what do you think of the changes? Let me know your thoughts about the episode in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this and want more cut content videos, remember to leave a like. Here are some other videos that I think you might enjoy, and feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe everyone.